Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me is my good brother here in the temple, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zidari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Zidari Enterprises is making a statement now. When Capcom's stocks hit the same low value that Niji, Sanji, and any color stocks have hit, Zidari Enterprises will be seriously considering buying controlling interests of Capcom to fix them.
I would also like to take this time to remind you that playing black pill games in the temple is punishable by a public flogging.
I usually try to leave it to the monk, usually. But at this point, I'm getting a bit fucking over-encumbered by your weighty bullshit. And I ain't even playing a game that has encumbrance.
So, last time around, we went through the basics of character creation in regards to creating your avatar in the world of Ragnarock.
Transferring down the umbilical descent, abandoning yourself from Mundania, and going into Ragnarok.
Yep. So this time around, we're going to be doing a bit of a double feature because the next segments are going to involve two chapters that are fairly short. That being gameplay and combat.
Yep.
And this is where we've kind of hinted at this, but this is where the D4s are going to come into play. And as mentioned before, the reason D4s are used is because it looks like a guitar pick if you squint at it sideways.
The closest to being a guitar pick, and this is Word of God.
Mm-hmm. So since I took over the opening intro, I'll let you handle the first part when it comes to gameplay.
Yep. Well, the very first part of gameplay, get glory or get fucked. Either way, we're all having a good time if we play by the rules. Goldenrod is the Amp Lord of the Shockers. So, you've come this far, and having built your avatar, you're champing at your tongue ring to get started, am I right? You're thinking, screw all this fluffy narrative bullshit and tell me the damn rules. All right, Sparky, cough up that titanium barbell you just swallowed and make room for the meat and potatoes of gameplay. There's also a quick reference, or prefer a quickie summary of gameplay? Check out page 196 in the back of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we have, performance pools. This sounds mostly like what it says on the tin, that you get dice pools determined by how many d4s you're going to roll.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like here that the explanation of creating a performance pool. The Metal Maestro, aka Game Master, is the guy at every party who chants "Do it, do it, do it" repeatedly, egging you on to do something awesome, or alternatively, something that will undoubtedly fail epically. Their job is to guide you through your adventure, and in doing so, they'll inevitably ask you to form a performance pool. To do so, it's a lot like performance pools in every game that has them. You find a relevant skill, and you get a D4 for every mark in that skill. And of course, some special abilities are called power moves, as we talked about previously, may designate a required performance pool, or the Metal Maestro may even request of their own volition. You roll your pool, you keep track of how many 4s popped out. 4s are also called tributes. They generate a success. And then you keep track of how many 1s, which are feedback. And they slowly progress you towards a, quote, nasty fate. Additional dice may be added to the performance pool by way of power moves, the altar, and being bloodied, or the special effects of gear. Because some people like lists, nerd! Here's a quick recap. Each result of 4 generates a single success, also called a tribute. Each result of 1 will generate a single feedback, which contributes towards your feedback threshold. Note, if a performance pool results in 2s and 3s, but no 4s, that's less than awesome. That less than awesome roll is called a wash.
Mm-hmm. So then we have tribute bidding. A single tribute is often enough to succeed in a non-combat scenario. But like the gambling fools they are, a player may ask for additional benefits. So this is tribute bidding is basically degrees of success.
It sounds like it's degrees of success when you're requesting it, though.
Yeah. Actually, degrees of success might not be the best analogy. A better analogy might be raises in like L5R.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have wash, results with no 4s and no 1s. If after rolling a performance pool, a player generates 0 4s, it's determined to be a wash. The Maestro may decide that the narrative escalates against the avatars, or the avatars are slapped in the face with a particularly large fish. Either way, nothing metal happens, that's for sure. When a player gets a wash, they may add a dedication to the altar, but cannot use it in the same performance pool that was rolled. So we do have a bit of fail forward in that case.
Yep, you get a dedication for later rolls.
And I should clarify, all that is needed for a wash is no fours. If you still generated feedback, that still works as normal.
Yep. Well, there's also a good note there. A note for the washouts. A wash is a very humbling experience in Ragnarok, but it doesn't have to be considered a failure, which may be the first instinct for folks playing fantasy fun time RPGs, trademark. Think of a wash as a fart in the wind, a smelly, flappy one. Nothing to write home to your mama about unless you have that kind of relationship with your mama. We won't judge much, but certainly no cause for shame. In fact, when you roll a wash, you ought to make a fart sound just to own it. In simpler terms, a wash feels more like something that would happen in Mundania and can create a moment in the game where all dramatic tension is released, just like a fart. In this case, whatever the result is, for better or worse, it's definitely not a metal result. Just keep that in mind.
Then we have a facepalm, only once. Very rarely will there be a roll consisting only of feedback and nothing else. If it happens, it's considered a pretty spectacular belly flop. When you facepalm, you're unable to use dedications from the altar or manipulate your roll in any way. All the feedback applies to the feedback track and may trigger hiatus. Not only will there be no chance of success, but the situation may escalate in a manner determined by your Metal Maestro. So then we have rolling multiple times, where it's up to the Maestro. Although I do like it says be Lars Ulrich in character, not a Lars Ol Porsport. We'll see ourselves out. Yeah, you do that.
That was a really bad pun.
And pulling from the altar. A player can always increase their chance for additional tributes by adding d4s to their performance pool. They do this by grabbing one or more dedications from the altar, if there are any available. Each dedication used in this way adds 1d4 to a performance pool roll. Any dedications used are automatically spent and will not be returned to the altar. Additionally, anytime you use dedications from the altar to add to your performance pool, you are prohibited from dedicating any new tributes to the altar until your next turn, meaning if you have excess tributes, you'd better find a good way to use them or they go to waste.
Nice.
So it is a bit of an extra effort mechanic, but not in the same way as some of the other ones we've talked about. So then we
it's a communal pool of additional dice.
Yeah,
at least in some part of what dedications do.
In that regard, it's going to remind me of like Fortune Pool from Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition, or the light side dark side system in FFG Star Wars.
Let's
see, but then we have assistants, i.e. duets. Each character has the option to help an individual as long as they're within range to do so. For their aid, the performance pool participants add 1d4 for each bandmate assisting. How many players can participate? Do they need to give a compelling justification? For these answers, you're at the mercy of your Metal Maestro. Assisting in combat is done by harmonizing.
And as we discussed on the glossary page, harmonizing is done when everybody has the same initiative count on the initiative track.
And then tributes. Everything awesome that has ever happened in the world of Ragnarok has happened thanks to the grace of the 6 gods of metal. Avatars of Ragnarok will dedicate their heroic actions to the gods as tributes. Players primarily generate tributes through dice rolls, and they spend said tributes on doing amazing stuff that oozes epicness. Basically, tributes are like cool bucks that you first generate and then spend on an in-game pursuit of rad shit. Not only do they signal successes, but they're also a liquid resource that allows you to do things like succeed narratively, activate power moves, improve combat results, and dedicate to the altar. Tributes are generated by getting 4 results on performance checks, which can include but are not limited to performance pool rolls, power moves, hype actions, and combat actions. If there are any tributes left over, and if leftover tributes cannot be spent or converted into dedications, They're discarded at the conclusion of a round.
Nice.
So succeed. Go. Yeah, I'll let you take it.
So these are covering some of the things that that tributes can do. First, succeed narratively. Spending tributes to take control of the narrative is the best way to make shit happen in Ragnarok, as nothing is better than seeing magical metal things happen either by your hand or the sweet words of the Metal Maestro. Using tributes to succeed narratively moves the story forward in a way that benefits avatars and the intentions they've laid out. During non-combat, most performance pool checks require 1 tribute to succeed. However, the Metal Maestro may allow you to bid for additional tributes and take your result from a success to a kick-ass symphony of bodaciousness. See tribute bidding. The Metal Maestro can and should encourage players to consider what jaw-dropping descriptions and outcomes are possible when they're not stingy in their tribute spending. The more a player is willing to risk, the more that the Metal Maestro will be inclined to reward their efforts. Narratively speaking, how you go about spending tributes is pretty open, like your fly, so go wild. You can always turn tributes into dedications for later use if nothing tickles your whistle right now. I like that. Combat. As mentioned, combat in Ragnarok can be greatly affected by the number of tributes spent. While in combat, tributes can be used to deal damage from your weapon, prevent damage using your outfit, or manipulate your place in combat using speed. Seek Chapter 5 Combat to learn more. Activate power moves. As a kick-ass demigod, your avatar has access to special abilities and maneuvers called power moves. See Chapter 6 Power Moves. And activating them often requires the spending of tributes or dedications in some cases. You'll know if a particular power move has a cost because, it'll be listed on the power move entry under cost. And there's a power move here called Raise Your Fist and Yell in the example I'm actually going to read out. Raise your fist and yell. There's loud, there's heavy metal loud, and then there is the sound that pours forth from your lips as all your rage, pain, and pure badassery coalesces into a scream worthy of the metal gods. Forget shattering mere glass. This oral attack can blast to pieces any nerve, bone, and eardrum in the vicinity. Make sure your bandmates have their earplugs in. Apply 1 hit to all horde or schlub enemies within spitting distance. Performance pool is Legend Smithing, costs 1 tribute and 1 dedication. You can also activate an anthem. At the end of an adventure, the Metal Maestro may allow players to forge an anthem based on the events of their story. Anthems are effectively a special power move activated by multiple bandmates. They're huge, and you're probably pretty excited about them, but hold on to your butts. The whole thing, minus the butts, is covered later in Chapter 7, page 114. Right now, just know that they require bandmates to pool their tributes together in order to form a multi-effect creation that makes everybody look good. All right. We have the altar. Mm-hmm. Tributes that aren't spent after the performance pool has been rolled have the opportunity to get a second life on the altar. Excess tributes can be placed on the altar as dedications, which is essentially the group's pizza fund whenever they're hankering for some cheesy bread. There is 1 single altar shared by all the players at the table. You don't get your own, so play nice with the other children. Like I said, it's a shared pool. Players may take dedications from the altar in order to increase a performance pool by a single die. This can be done even after a performance pool has been rolled. The altar is also important because anthems and certain power moves can only be activated with dedications on the altar, some of which even reference how many dedications are on the altar at the moment it's activated. Why can't I do a bazillion dedications and fill up the altar? You may be asking. Because there's a cap on how many dedications can be on the altar. That's why. This cap is based on how powerful your adventuring band happens to be. See overflowing altar below. In summary, another list, nerdburgers. Dedications on the altar can be used for increasing a player's performance pool by 1d4, activating certain power moves, activating anthems. Overflowing altar. The 6 aren't infinite batteries of energy. While you may be clutching your narrative pearls like a recalcitrant clam. I did not expect to see the word recalcitrant in a metal document, but okay, I'll take it. The altar does have a maximum limit of storage before it begins to overflow, rendering it unable to accept any more dedications until previous ones are spent. An adventuring band's altar storage is determined through adding the bandmate's highest notoriety to the number of bandmates. So if you have there's a I'm going to read this example because it's hilarious. The DAPS, dope-ass power snakes, have a Bloodguard, Amplord, Howler, and Cordmaster in their adventuring band. The Bloodguard has the highest notoriety of 4, so the altar of the group overflows when total dedications reach 8. 4 for the highest notoriety, plus 4 for the members of the band. That's cool. I like that. Tokens are dice management for tributes in the altar. Yes, the rules around dedications in the altar are cool as hell. You don't have to tell us, man. We wrote the thing. But because they tend to fluctuate wildly and frequently, we recommend that you find a method to keep a track of these flexibly bitchin' resources. One option involves using the face of a die to represent how many dedications you've thrown down. The downside of this is that a die can be lost, forgotten, swallowed, or picked up by accident. We humbly recommend using tokens to keep track of tributes and dedications, as well as the creation of a dedicated area, such as a box or small dish to serve as the altar. These tokens can be anything: guitar picks, bottle caps, glass beads. As long as you have plenty to pass around, we don't care what they are. Hell, use the teeny tiny bones of your late hamster. Thanks, Vermin Melville. We won't yuck your yum. Just don't tell us how you got them. You do you.
If you wanted to be apropos to this kind of game, grab a bunch of cheap guitar picks and use those.
Dude, I could go down to the local guitar center and get like a stack of 50 guitar picks for $2.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know a buddy of mine was doing the same thing when it came to bennies for his Savage Worlds campaigns.
I mean, anyone who plays any sort of collecting card game probably has a fuck ton of tokens lying around.
Especially if you were playing sliver decks back in the day. And by the way, fuck you.
Monk just doesn't appreciate the beauty of the slivers.
No, I appreciate the beauty of the slivers. I still hate it.
You wouldn't have liked my Esper deck then. It was blue, black, white, life gain, death touch, sliver stuff. And if I ever got Sanguine Bond and Exquisite Blood on the deck, you were done. That was it. That was the end of the game. As soon as you took 1 damage, everybody at the table died but me.
Remember my comment about fuck you?
Yes.
Second verse, same as the first.
Now you could put me in a plane so I could put them in a hearse. There you go. I'll complete it.
Next is feedback. This is a game about demigods doing cool things, right? If you wanted to deal with failure, you just continue living your dull, sad, mortal existence, right? But without conflict or even setbacks, how would you ever know victory? How would you measure yourself against existence's proverbial banana peel? In Gods of Metal Ragnarok, you essentially have a bar tab for failures. We call it feedback, and when you've accumulated too much of it, you get booted out of the bar until you sober up. The bar in this analogy is the realm of Ragnarock. In a performance pool, any die that gives you a result of 1 generates a feedback. Once a player reaches their feedback threshold, they go on hiatus. Feedback can also be generated by power moves, environmental effects, and certain other situations. It can even be imposed by the Metal Maestro. The good news is that multiple feedbacks in a round can be reduced, though only to a minimum of 1. Don't get too excited. You gotta be a registered badass with high notoriety before that can happen. Besides being a registered badass with high notoriety, you can reduce your feedback through downtime, the Metal Maestro unleashing enemy feedback moves in combat, and going on hiatus. So with downtime, it is exactly... Avatars can complete a downtime event during a session to reduce their feedback by half of its current total, rounding down for the well-considered and nuanced reason that you suck.
That is a good reason.
Mm-hmm. It's encouraged to discuss how the band wants to spend their downtime, but they must pay the cost of a dedication for each player in the band from the altar to do so. Also, downtime doesn't mean napping. Go be original, for fuck's sake. Avatars and demigods are, after all... Avatars are demigods, after all. They'll sleep when they're dead, and legends never die. Another option, enemy feedback moves in combat. Monsters in Ragnarok also have power moves that will absorb an avatar's feedback as a cost to unleash a more devastating attack. This is all explained in more detail with the Metal Maestro section. And returning from hiatus, When an avatar returns from being on hiatus, they come back with their feedback track squeaky clean. They have a fresh start, which will of course be tainted when they inevitably make terrible choices and or have crappy luck again. After returning to Ragnarock from a hiatus, reset your feedback track to 0 and get back into the action lickety-split. And we have the feedback threshold. The feedback threshold is the amount of feedback an avatar can absorb before hiatus gets triggered. This number can be increased through gear and abilities, but starts at 10. It's located on your character sheet.
Nice.
And then we have hiatus.
Mm-hmm. Once your character has faced the umbilical descent, they will have developed a deep connection with the realm of Ragnarok. Though they are sallying forth into a career of import and adventure within this epic world of heavy metal fantasy, they haven't escaped the world of Mundania completely. In fact, eventually the connection between Mundania and Ragnarok will begin to fizzle, like growing static from a bad TV antenna. That's why it's all called feedback. This fizzle will happen because A, the character has soaked up enough feedback from their exploits, or B, because the character has been beaten to within an inch of their lives. Either way, once the connection between worlds is lost, the poor sap will return to that damned gray waste. Once pummeled with feedback or damage, Mundanians will find themselves pulled out of their avatar bodies and thrust back into the world of Mundania. Their former, way less awesome selves will be forced back into suffering and tedium, trademark, all the while avoiding the watchful eyes of the executors. This is called being on hiatus. This banishment is not permanent, thank the Six, but it's also not without some stakes. Having now been made aware of the executors' secrets, the Mundanians are in more danger than ever. The executors are overlords of this efficient and mundane realm, and if the Mundanian is caught trying to break the perfect order the executors have created, said Mundanian may find themselves quickly taken care of. And that's in quotes, taken care of. While the Mundanians' attempts to refine their connection to Ragnarok might sound stupid boring compared to having bombastic adventures in Ragnarok, as the bull-horned, red-skinned Lord of Darkness once said, there cannot be light without dark. Oh, except our version is there cannot be awesome without dull. Ragnarok and Mundania are opposites, but the two realms need one another for balance. Without one, the other cannot exist. Put another way, going on hiatus is a wonderful role-playing opportunity. While a player will no doubt want to get their character out of Mundania and back into the Ragnarok action as soon as possible, we encourage players to enjoy the journey. Really grind those lemons into your Mundanian's wounds with the suffering and tedium you've created for them. Lemon juice is so passé. Use pure acerbic acid, not just the weak shit from the lemon.
Besides, everybody knows I'm no stranger to drinking lemon juice or eating lemons.
Indeed. Going on hiatus. If an avatar's feedback exceeds their current feedback threshold, the avatar will go on hiatus. Before you're unceremoniously kicked back to Mundania, a few things happen first. After rolling your current performance pool, do the following. Check for tributes. Check for feedback. Apply any tributes towards success or dedicate them to the altar. Resolve success or failure of your current action. Apply feedback to your feedback track. If you have met or exceeded your feedback threshold, go on hiatus. If you are sent on hiatus, then whatever the other players will doing will continue as normal for them. All that will remain of your avatar is a couple of footprints and blobs of sweat where you were just standing. And then there's a note here that says, players will also go on hiatus at the end of an activation if an avatar has 0 hits remaining on their meat track. And then it says, when do players on hiatus resolve their turns? This depends heavily on the Metal Maestro. Going on hiatus is akin to splitting the party in most other whoop-de-doo, I'm going on an adventure RPGs trademark. We usually recommend that if the majority of players are in combat, the player who is on hiatus acts during their normal tempo. If the majority of players are in non-combat, it's up to the Metal Maestro to determine the times at which a visit to the hiatusing player would serve the story. Mm-hmm. So, the person on hiatus acts whenever the Metal Maestro feels like it, basically. Yep. Getting out of Mundania and understanding personal efficiency points, or PEP. I hate to break it to you, but eventually you're going to be sent back to Mundania. It's sad, but true. However, it's not your permanent fate. In fact, it's more like a timeout, or dare we say, being on hiatus. No shit. When your avatar is thrust out of Ragnarok and put on hiatus, they find that they are back in their original body with the same boring responsibilities. Among these responsibilities are the expectation of maintaining your weekly allotment of 42 personal efficiency points. We're going to call these suckers PEP because acronyms are sexy. PEP is the mechanism with which the executors of Mundania control you and your fellow Mundanian workers. The executors demand that Mundanians always meet their goal of 42 PEP, so your mission is to reduce your PEP as low as possible to get back into Ragnarok. Essentially, the goal of being on hiatus is to tell a good metal story, provide some background for your Mundanian, and come up with situations that test their capacity to endure suffering and tedium, trademark. So how do we do this? In order to return to Ragnarok, your character must make a successful roll to return. You have several options while on hiatus, but they'll all lead to you getting back to Ragnarok. To do so, you'll have to make a roll to return and get a result higher than your current PEP value. But first, you'll need to reduce your PEP by choosing from the actions described. If your bandmates are in combat, then you'll choose one of these options during your tempo order. Otherwise, your Metal Maestro will decide the pace and timing for your escape from Mundania. You'll work together with the Metal Maestro to describe the suffering and tedium that your Mundanian is experiencing, while also formulating the ways in which you're attempting to rekindle your reconnection to Ragnarok. What are you going to do to get your ass back there? How are you going to avoid the ire of the executors? And the options are: interrupt the status quo, reduce your PEP by 5. Disrupt society, reduce your PEP by 15. Problematic individual check. Flip the table, immediately return to Ragnarok, guaranteed strike on permanent record. Roll to return, roll 2d4. Interrupt the status quo. You're essentially doing something that the executors would find annoying, but otherwise harmless. Filing papers incorrectly, delaying your commute by 15 seconds, and eating double rations would all be considered interrupting the status quo. When you interrupting this, that's supposed to be when you're interrupting the status quo, reduce your PEP by 5. Disrupt society. This is something the executors would not stand for under any circumstances, and if you were caught, it would lead to serious consequences. Things like wearing just your underwear to work, or nothing at all. Vandalizing public property, or dumping a bag of marbles off a 2-story building into a busy thoroughway. Monk, why was that attacking us?
I didn't use marbles, I used pennies.
Fair, but it's still attacking us. Disrupting society will always reduce your PEP by 15, but you will be noticed by an executor after resolving the action, and will have to pass a problematic individual check, or else you may earn a strike on your permanent record. Reminder, when avatars are sent back to Mundania on hiatus, they do not return as their avatar, but as their boring run-of-the-mill Mundanian. It's like the Rognus school never appeared to them, and they never departed to the Grey Waste. And we have flip the table. There's one incredibly hardcore way for a Mundanian stuck player to gain immediate access back to Ragnarok, and that is to wreck the absolute fuck out of your poor Mundanian's life. When the time comes for the player to describe their action, instead of gently trying to bridge the gap between two worlds, they can choose to bring the reckless mayhem of Ragnarok to Mundania. This is the dangerous as hell option, as it contributes greatly to the chance of a permanent death for your Mundanian persona and your avatar. It is a firebomb solution that gets you back into Ragnarok immediately and digs another shovel full of dirt toward your grave. Flip the table will immediately send a Mundanian back to Ragnarok. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But it will also catch the attention of an executor, and a strike will immediately be put on your permanent record. And we have the roll to return. If you are feeling like your PEP has been reduced enough, then you can attempt to roll to return. Players who want to return will roll 2d4, with the first dice being the 10's result, and the second dice being the 1's result, for a result of 11 to 44. Ignore any tributes and feedbacks as only the actual number results matter, and dedications cannot be used as they only apply to Ragnarok. If the dice roll exceeds the player's current PEP, they are freed from Mundania immediately and will return to Ragnarok to spread glory again. Note, if you fail to exceed your current PEP with your roll to return, you'll trigger an immediate problematic individual check as described below. Another note, if you've managed to reduce your PEP to less than 10, then your attempt to return to Ragnarok will be automatically successful, as it is impossible to roll beneath what you're required to roll on the 2 dice. And then finally, problematic individual checks and permanent records. The world of Mundania is filled with executors, the keepers of order and efficiency left over from the age of the Ragnarock. Mangaron, excuse me. These cold beings have taken their tasks to the furthest extreme. They seek to create banal homogeneity across the sprawling expanse of mundania. Banal homogeneity. That's a phrase. Executors do not tolerate any kind of loud, disruptive, vulgar, or obscene behavior and always keep an eye out for individuals causing a disturbance. If, after resolving an action in Mundania, you find yourself catching the negative attention of an executor, you'll have to endure a problematic individual check. For this check, roll 1d4. On a result of 4, a result of 4, it's another typo, you've managed to avoid the scrutiny of the executor, and nothing happens. Congratulations! A result of 3 or 2 means that the executors are onto you, and they'll assign you additional work. In game terms, this means that either of these results increase your current PEP score by 3, making it harder to return to Ragnarock. A result of 1, however, gets you an immediate strike on your permanent record. To recap in nerd list form, result of 4, nothing negative happens, continue as usual. Result of 2 or 3 increases your PEP by 3. Result of 1, immediately add a strike to your permanent record. Alternatively, you might return to Ragnarok because you flipped the table, but bummer, friendo, your so-called problematic actions have caused enough of a disturbance that you'll get marked as a dangerous aberration. A strike will be put on your permanent record. If you receive 3 strikes to your permanent record because of your behavior, your next return to Mundania will be met with capture by an executor. Your Mundanian, as well as their Ragnarok avatar, will be lost to the Grey Wastes forever. The Metal Maestro may also choose to ramp up the danger by having a Mundanian assess, after you've been on hiatus a certain number of times, whether you are indeed problematic. Whenever you are on hiatus from that point forward, you must make a problematic individual check after each time you interrupt the status quo as well. Reducing strikes. If you wish to reduce your strikes and prolong the life of your avatar on Mundanian, it won't be easy. That's the sort of thing that can be accomplished only through the divine interference of the gods of metal, and their godly decisions depend on the Metal Maestro's narrative choices. We'll elaborate in Chapter 10. Finally, coming back from hiatus, after their trials in Mundania, your avatar will re-enter Ragnarok with renewed zest and vigor. They'll regain 1/2 of their meat track, rounding up because you and your avatar are so damn cool. So you round down going to Mundania because you suck. But you round down coming back because you're cool. So if your meat track was at 3 when you got banished to Mundania, congratulations, you're getting 2 points to add to your meat track. Because half of 3 is 1.5, and then we round up. You get it, you math whiz, you. Also, your feedback track is reduced back to 0.
Mm-hmm. So, I'd honestly say that when it comes to the core mechanics, I'd honestly say folks who have a little bit of a background with Fate dice are going to have an easier time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's a case of yes or no. Do I think some people who have a background with more success-based affairs, like Shadowrun, are going to have an easier time? Kinda. I'd honestly say Shadowrun Anarchy vets might have an easier time, but anyone who's used to D20 plus a shitload of modifiers will have a harder time. I will say, though, that anyone who is well versed in the world of the indies will have the easiest time.
I wonder why that is.
especially since, one, they're not worried about where everybody is on the grid. This isn't that kind of game. And 2, there is a kind of, for lack of a better term, feedback loop when it comes to the resources. I know some people have a hate boner for what they call meta-narrative mechanics or anything like that, but the reason they exist is because they work. If you want that kind of simulation, go play your happy fun times fantasy game. I really love the different versions of saying we're talking about D&D and its derivatives and all but name, but not saying it for legal purposes.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get to combat. What would an epic heavy metal fantasy RPG be without some epic heavy metal combat? Not a whole hell of a lot, that's what. Nothing is more satisfying than cleaving a hellhound with your preferred weapon while simultaneously activating your power moves and pulling off some dope-ass metal wizardry. At the same time, winning all the time isn't satisfying. Without the scent of failure in the air or the taste of your own potential demise in the back of your throat, victories will seem hollower than the skulls of your enemies. What we're trying to say is that being awesome and prevailing in combat feels gratifying only if there's the chance that you'll completely and utterly bite it. Or else there's no tension. You might as well have made the choice to sit on your couch, eat hard candy from your grandmother's purse, and listen to Gammy talk about her asthmatic tabby with devil eyes named Lord Flufferbutt. So even though you're a demigod, you are still a vulnerable demigod who can be banished back to the Grey Waste if things go south. Get banished too many times because you can't quit throwing yourself headlong into the meat grinder, you may never come back to Ragnarock. Anyway, enough of the ye have been warned talk. Let's split the Xando and headbutt these rules so you're ready to charge into battle. Roll for tempo. Then we have initiative, or setting the tempo. Once combat has been initiated, you'll know because your Metal Maestro has said as much, or has put on the battle music. Roll 5d4 and add the result. The avatars with the lowest tempo begins the first activation. As you've probably sussed out, you cannot roll a 1-4 with 5d4 dice, so those results can only be obtained by changing your tempo via speed, see below. And no, you can't just roll a vanilla d20, you schmuck. Have some respect.
Remember, this game is D4s only, assholes.
Mm-hmm. Then we have, I look at the 5d4 thing as a case of specifically being done so you can't just have that level of shit initiative.
Well, the lower your initiative, the better off you are.
Mm-hmm. So then we have activation. An activation is when an avatar gets to do something interesting. It's their time to shine by describing what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. If they're able to match their tempo values, multiple avatars can play during an activation. This is called harmonizing. During an avatar's activation, they may do one basic thing and/or one cool thing. There are several cool things to be done, including attacking, starting an anthem, kicking off a power move. Basic things include moving, checking a skill, or adjusting your leather pants. For more on basic and/or cool things, keep reading. It's not far. Don't be lazy. Once all avatars in an activation have finished performing their things, the activation ends. The Metal Maestro then determines if an enemy can have an activation using the monster type rules in Chapter 10. After an enemy activation, if there is one, the next avatar in the order of tempo begins their activation. So we do have a bit of a flexible initiative.
Yep.
But it's not exactly popcorn, which I'm fine with. I don't have anything against popcorn, but it can lead to some arguments.
We've seen that back during Emberwind.
And that technically wasn't using popcorn, but it was using something close. There's also the fact that popcorn initiative can be tricky to track in, say, a VTT. I know some people are like, you shouldn't be doing a VTT, you should be doing it in person. Well, sometimes you have a choice. Stick to doing it in person out of principle and run the risk of not playing at all, or play through VTT and actually play the damn game.
I mean, considering what we're reviewing right now, Monk, my response to anyone who says you shouldn't play through VTT and should only play in person is, fuck you. You don't get to tell me how I play the game. You're not my mom, and you're not paying me.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck off.
But so then we have player actions, and I'll let you take over on that one.
All right. Just for the listeners out there, hiya listeners, here is a brief summary of what you can do in combat. Basic thing. Relocate based on speed, change tempo, roll speed, a simple action that doesn't require a skill check, like opening a door, type. a cool thing. Complex actions that require a skill check, like breaking down a door. I love how they use the two different. Opening a door doesn't require a skill check, but breaking it down does. Basic attack, start an anthem, activate a power move, reduce feedback. There's a way to reduce feedback in combat. That's good. Things like talking and flipping the bird at the bad... I don't know if that's a typo or intentional. Oh, no. Never mind. There's a hyphen. I get it. Things like talking and flipping the bird at the baddie doesn't cost you a damn thing. Roleplay and antagonize your opponents as much as you want. First description, relocate. During your activation, you can reposition your avatar up to a distance set by your speed. 1 is grabbing distance, 3 is spitting distance, 5 is stage distance, 8 is amphitheater distance, and 10 is what the fuck distance. That's WTF, but I'm going to say what the fuck out loud. I just don't care. Mm-hmm. Change tempo. During your activation, your avatar can change their tempo in order to better harmonize with their bandmates. First, roll a performance pool equal to your speed attribute. For each tribute spent, change the tempo result by plus or minus 1. For example, if you rolled a 5 during the beginning of combat, you could change it to a 4 or a 6 for 1 tribute on a speed roll. Hype. Sometimes when you're out of options, the best thing to do is hype up your crew who are about to kick ass. This is what we call a hype action. A fun, pump up the team move that also conveniently plops a nice juicy dedication on the altar. Hyping comes in lots of flavors, but it tends to involve bantering, posing, or hollering in a way that supports the section of your bandmate, or the action of your bandmate. I misread that. That's my bad. For those about to kick ass, we salute you. You cannot hype 2 activations in a row. Sorry. You couldn't end that in a better way. Like, you cannot hype 2 activations in a row. Then you're just jobbing. That would have been better. Then we get attack. Ah, the sweet, sweet sound of bones breaking. Select a single target in range, roll your attack dice as a performance pool, and for each tribute spent, apply damage to said target. Reduce feedback. By forgoing your cool thing this round, you get to remove 1 feedback from your feedback threshold. The more feedback you have, the closer you are to getting booted back to Mundania. So this feedback reduction goes a long way towards strengthening your ties to Ragnarock. This action may not be altered in any way and cannot be done more than once during combat, even if a power move or anything else grants additional actions. So you can only reduce feedback once? Wow. Okay. Activate a power move. Choose one of your power moves to activate and resolve the effects described, paying any costs that may be set out in the entry of that move. Start an anthem. Kick off one of the most epic of power moves you can imagine. Check the total cost of the anthem you wish to activate against the total number of dedications on the altar. Once the cost found in the anthem entry has been paid, go around the table, having everyone move the band, or everyone in the band describe the effects of each anthem move. Then you may begin the Symphony of Destruction. See anthems on page 114. Combat distances and zones. Oh, it's zone-based gameplay. It's awesome. I love it. Mm-hmm. Knowing where you are in relation to your enemy is pretty important when it comes to beating the crap out of stuff. That being said, it's not very metal to keep track of squares, 10-foot poles, and the like. That kind of stuff is for Mundanians. So instead, battlefield combat in Gods of Metal Ragnarok is broken into relative distances. These estimations are what players can use to engage their opponents, move throughout the environment, and explore during an encounter, as detailed by the Metal Maestro. During a player activation, a player chooses a target, such as an enemy, and the Metal Maestro tells them the relative distance to it. These distances are broken down into grabbing, spitting, stage, amphitheater, and what the fuck. If something is described as a zone, it refers to the area which radiates out from a target, such as an avatar, an enemy, or any fixed or moving point. A zone can be described with these relative distances as well, a spitting-sized zone or a staged-sized zone, etc. Players who are a distance, such as grabbing, spitting, or even stage distance away must rely on the Metal Maestro to tell them the new relative distance to the target. Ultimately, since these are largely arbitrary and speculative distances, the Hollywood Bowl is much larger than the Hard Rock Amphitheater. It's up to your Metal Maestro to describe it as best they can, If you find yourself arguing over 50 or even 500 feet when it comes to an ability or activation, put away the rulers and do what makes the coolest story. And it shows this nice little, I guess, model of how the distances radiate out from the center. Like grabbing distance is being right there to grab somebody. Spitting is stepping back a little bit. Stage is stepping back a little bit further. Amphitheater's way back, and what the fuck is all the way out. And then here's the general breakdown. You forgot the W and down. Breakdown of the zone distances. Grabbing. The space between an avatar and another bosom buddy that they could clasp or smash. Is that smash or smash? The answer is yes. Spitting. Close enough to catch a loogie. Why would you want to catch a loogie? You want to spit the loogie. You want to be spitting on someone else. I'm not spitting on you. Stage. 6 seconds of hardcore parkour to get there, or about the length of a concert stage. I love that there's a reference to hardcore parkour. That's great. Amphitheater. Everyone looks like wee little leprechauns, and you can mind pinch their skulls with the tips of your fingers, crushing their heads. Oh, God. I'm crushing your head, I'm crushing your head, I'm crushing your head. If you don't get that reference, what have you done with your life? Or you're too young. Fuck off. Why is his head already crushed? I'm pitching your face, I'm pitching your face, I'm pitching your face. And then, finally, what the fuck? This range is reserved for the superhuman feats of distance and accuracy that are typically attributed to Elfando Bloom and Annie Oakhammer. It's like long barrel sniper sharpshooter shit range is what we're saying. Elfando Bloom and Annie Oakhammer. God damn it. I'm not explaining that joke. Fuck you if you don't get the second name especially. Like the first name's easy, but I would actually expect some people not to know the second name.
Mm-hmm. That still only counts as one. See, then we have nerds and drawings, which is
models and drawings.
Which is once again, it's relative. No need to draw out 5 foot, 5 or 10 foot squares to make this work. P.S. We'd love to see your cool ass minis and encounters. Melee attacks. An avatar with making a melee weapon can attack a target within grabbing distance. Simple enough, right? Ranged attacks. An avatar making a ranged weapon attack usually can only be accomplished on targets within spitting and stage distance from your avatar. Ranged weapons cannot target things that are grabbing distance. However, as with all things Ragnarock, these are guidelines that are meant to simplify understanding, not make it more lame. You want a pistol that shoots at close range? We recommend just making it a melee attack, but reskinning it like a gunslinger. Work with your Metal Maestro to lay out the specifics in your gear. And might. When players make an attack roll, they apply damage equal to the might of the weapon for each tribute spent directly to the monster/foe in question. So, say the weapon has a might of 4. That means if you spend 3 tributes, you hit the foe with 12 damage, because 3 times 4 is 12, number wizards. Just tally up the damage and let the Metal Maestro's narrative skill guide you the rest of the way home. Also, side note, just because you deal damage doesn't mean the opponent can't soak up that tasty damage. That said, it ain't your problem anymore. Then we have primal damage. If an attack does primal damage and the enemy is a primal type, check the damage and type on the primal color wheel. So we have a color wheel. This is basically the 6 elements, which are ice, sky, metal, fire, stone, and shadow.
And it's clear that the opposites are ice and fire, stone and sky, and shadow and metal.
Mm-hmm. So then we have tolerance. Even after soaking up any incoming damage from an attack, avatars and their enemies have a way to lessen some of that damage before it is assigned to the meat track. Tolerance is how much damage an avatar or opponent can take before they take a hit on their meat track. If the final damage is higher than the tolerance, and they take a hit on their meat track. If it's lower, it's assumed that you/their might or speed is too strong to deal any meaningful damage. That being said, in a game of demigods and monsters, things can get nasty quick. If the damage is double the tolerance, the target takes 2 hits. If it's triple, they take 3 hits, etc., etc., etc. This means that even after defense rolls are complete, high amounts of damage can spiral quickly and end up rendering a combatant who's unprepared for such an onslaught banished or dead.
Fun.
Then we have defense. If a player receives damage, they can roll a performance pool of dice equal to their defense value. Any tributes rolled this way can be used to reduce damage by the defense value. These tributes scale like damage and attack, reducing the incoming harm by a multiplied amount.
There's an example there that I think makes a good example of what they're talking about.
Although they talk about having a defense of 5, but rolling 3d4.
I think it's a typo.
Then I'll take this next one since there's only a couple things.
Okay.
Then we have primal damage types. Besides good old-fashioned run-of-the-mill damage, there are several other types of damage within the world of Ragnarock. The very primal forces of the cosmos can be used to great effect when funneled through a blade or a spell. Elemental powers of flame, sky, stone, ice, metal, and shadow can be focused and wielded against those that stand against you. Learning how and when to use each of them requires practice and an understanding of the particular weaknesses of the foe standing before you. Weapons and power moves with a primal energy type do additional damage to enemies weak against that primal energy type. However, they will do less damage against enemies strong to that primal energy type. If they are opposites, the damage is doubled. If the types are the same, it does half damage, rounding down. Pretty standard affair.
Also, looking at that example, Monk, I think I understand what it was saying. The typo is in how many dice were rolled. They should have rolled 5d4, but it says defense of 5 parentheses 3. That's the multiplication value. I'm almost sure of it, because they got 1 tribute and 1 feedback, and the incoming damage was reduced by 3.
So then we have Harmonize. Players with the same tempo value have the awesome benefit of being able to resolve both of their actions simultaneously. This essentially showcases that the teammates are really vibing with each other. What this means rules-wise is that the players who share a tempo value may collectively share tribute/feedback however they want before the activation ends. This can lead to some brutal combinations when using the altar. I'd say that's an easier way to use teamwork than some games we've looked at over the years.
That's a pretty good way to do it. But with that, we move on to the meat track. The amount of hits an avatar can withstand is denoted by dots on a player character's sheet. A series of dots between 3 major thresholds, battered, beaten, and bloodied, make up what's lovingly referred to as a meat track. And there are thresholds indicated on these meat tracks where you transfer from battered to beaten to bloodied. There is a meat modifier. Once your avatar has accumulated enough hits on their meat track, denoted on your character sheet, the avatar hits a threshold and immediately gains the benefit of special augmentations known as meat modifiers. Only 1 meat modifier can be active at a time, and it will always be the strongest of them. I.e., if a player is bloodied, they will always apply the bloodied meat modifier instead of the beaten or battered modifiers. Battered. A player who has reached this stage on the meat track can gain an additional 1d4 to apply to their first performance pool rolled during each activation. Beaten. A player who has reached this stage on the meat track can gain an additional tribute and apply it to their first performance pool rolled during each activation. These tributes cannot be dedicated to the altar. Bloodied. A player who has reached this stage on the meat track can gain 2 additional tributes to apply to their first performance pool rolled during each activation. These tributes cannot be dedicated to the altar. So this is this is a method by which, unlike every wound track we have ever seen in any other game ever, I think, at least any game I can think off the top of my head, this is a wound track which the more wounded you are, the better you get.
The only one I can think of that that is a closest analog is Tenra.
Yes. Okay. Okay. And that's, I can't say it's the same way, and I can't say it's even as cool as this one, because what this one does is, okay, you're in the first part of the wound track, you get an extra die to roll with. Once you're in the second part of the and it's only on the first action for that activation. Once you're on the second wound track section, you get what attribute is an auto success. That's a single success right there. You already have a success to whatever you're going to do for the first thing you're going to do, that activation. Mm-hmm. And then at Bloodied, you have 2 auto successes. So there's clearly some. This is a way of making risk versus reward even bigger in this game.
Yeah.
That the more hurt you are, the more auto successes you get for action, the first action on your activation. That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're you're bloodied and you're fighting some sort of big legendary monster creature, and you and the boys are all on the same tempo. So everybody's going to harmonize for an anthem. Well, I've got 2 tributes to just throw on that anthem when we actually roll. And the dedication altar's full up. So let's do this shit. Then we have Death's Door. So I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want first? We can't hear you, so who cares? We're going to give you the good news first. If you lose all of the hits in your meat track, your avatar isn't dead. In fact, you can lose your total meat track up to 3 times before your character is considered dead, as in no longer playable. The bad news is that each time your meat track is reduced to 0, you've got to mark a single hit on your permanent record and then head straight back to Mundania on hiatus. Why would it have to go on your permanent record? Huh. If you'd like, confer with the Metal Maestro about the lasting effects this hiatus will leave on your character. The horrors of dropping into and out of Mundania after taking such harsh damage could leave lasting mental and physical scars, which can be terrible, sure, but they could also make you look and behave even more like a badass than you did before your trauma. So, yeah. I'm not sure that I think... I'm not sure that going back to Mundania through the death on your meat track, adding to your permanent record is... I'm not sure I like that rule. I don't know. There's something about that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem metal to me.
I think it's the fact that I get the feeling it's the fact that there's the 3 strike thing when it comes to the permanent record. Yeah,
I get that. But like generating feedback is obviously going to happen more than you dying because of both defenses and tolerance. Because your tolerance is really going to be a good damage mitigator. If you can roll well enough on your defense rolls and just reduce the damage below your tolerance, and you don't have to really worry about it anymore because it just doesn't hurt you. There's no hit to your meat track. But that doesn't preclude bad luck, like really bad luck. Like an enemy rolling a damage so high it does 3 times damage and kills you outright. Honestly, if it were me, I'd skip that part of the rule altogether and just have them go through hiatus as normal. I wouldn't impose a permanent mark on their record just because they died to wounds.
But you think that the permanent record is a bit of overpunish?
In my view, yes. Because the feedback, both the feedback track and the meat track, are different ways of measuring success and failure. Specifically, failure. Feedback is generated on ones, which is probably going to happen more often than people think, especially since these are D4s. Hitting a 1 is a 25% chance. That's pretty high. And going to hiatus on feedback is going to happen a lot more than going to hiatus on the meat track. But going to hiatus itself is already a highly risky thing. Because, you start at your PEP of 42, and you need to get it down into what you think might be a safer range so you can roll 2d4 to get back to Ragnarock. And if you don't, well, you could still end up with a permanent mark on your record. There's already enough risk going into hiatus that I don't think it's very fair for someone who died to meat track death to get a permanent mark immediately. That just doesn't, it's giving an additional cost to death when death already sends you back to hiatus, and hiatus is already so risky. It feels like double dipping.
Mm-hmm.
I think is the best way to put it. This is my first big criticism of this game. I don't think that death on the meat track should immediately give you a permanent record strike. Maybe a different sort of penalty while you're in Mundania. Like, if you do anything besides just a little bit of shaking the status quo, there's more scrutiny on you because of your shaken psyche from being splatted into meat bits. But not just an immediate permanent strike. Because there's no indication, I would say, that whether you go on hiatus through feedback or whether you go on hiatus through meat death of your avatar, there's no indication in the rules that says that one is different from the other, just that when you go on hiatus, your connection to Ragnarock has been severed, and the connection to your avatar.
Mm-hmm.
So how would the executors immediately know you came back from Ragnarock by death instead of by feedback and just give you a strike? It doesn't make sense lore-wise, and it feels like too high a cost mechanics-wise. I think that's those are the two big issues I have with it.
Yeah, I could see that.
Anyway, I will leave type of enemies to you now, Monk.
Yep. So the types of enemies are hordes, minor threats and grunts, activates once per round as a group or a swarm. Schlub, a significant member of a horde, an individual who may have a little more at stake, activates once per round. Elite, soldiers, captains, and dangerous foes, activates twice per round. Boss, a very powerful leader, often surrounded by lower ranked threats, can activate after every player term and may harmonize with a single enemy, horde or schlub. Legendary, an extremely powerful threat that is generally alone when encounter, activates after every player turn and may harmonize with a single enemy, elite, or boss. If you're taking the role of the Metal Maestro, you might want to explore the more in-depth explanations and rules surrounding the various types of enemies in Chapter 9, the Metal Menagerie. Before I get to the next part, Resistance, let's use Doom as our example of what would be an equivalent of each. I'd say Horde would be things like zombie men and imps.
Mm-hmm.
Schlub, Chain Gunner.
I knew you were going to say that.
Chain Gunner, Pinky.
No, I think a Pinky would probably be at elite.
Given that Pinkies end up being priority targets because they like to get in your face. And also, just to get it out of the way, yes, I'd consider Lost Souls to be hordes.
Obviously.
Annoying-ass hordes, but hordes nonetheless.
Yeah.
I think Elite would be a case of, in most encounters, shoot that one first. So, yeah, Pinkies, Pain Elementals.
Caco Demons.
Mm-hmm. Revenants.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, boss probably
Archviles.
yeah, Archviles, Cyber Demons, Spider Masterminds.
Um, and then of course, Hell Barons.
Yeah, Barons. Would you say Mancubus?
I think Mancubus could still technically be down at elite. Um, they're not quite the whole. Oh my god, absolutely need to focus that guy down before even caring about grunts thing.
Mm-hmm.
But they are, if there are no boss levels, they're still a priority target, just like Pinky.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Mancubus would still be elite.
Yeah. Oh, and
And
as far
as
as
for
the
legendary,
icon,
yeah, I was about to say Icon of Sin.
mm-hmm.
There's no question there. Or if we're talking Doom Eternal, yourself. Anyone who hasn't played the DLC to Doom Eternal, you are doing yourselves a disservice.
And as far as why I'd reference Doom for this kind of thing, well, Doom's always been downstream from heavy metal anyways since day one. So what? So why not? Plus, it's a monster roster that everyone knows in some form. That's still gonna fit within this.
Yep. And then I'm going to say, by the way, E1M1. Just go listen to E1M1 and tell me that's not metal.
Mm-hmm. The that particular thing has been worn down. If I were to do a deeper cut with say Rise of the Triad, most enemies would be hordes, except for things like Triad enforcers and monks.
Yep.
Which Triad enforcers and monks I'd say would be elite. I wouldn't
Yeah.
consider either. I think boss tier would be too. Even as annoying as the monks are, they aren't boss tier.
Yeah. There's very few boss tier there.
Well, it's not really that kind of game because let's not forget Rise of the Triad was supposed to be a Wolfenstein successor, and Wolfenstein never had the biggest enemy variety.
That's true.
I mean, you had you had soldiers, you had officers, you had mutants, and three bosses. Obviously, I'm not covering the nocturnal missions or any of the expanded content because expanded content with a lot of those shooters was a mixed bag.
Mm-hmm.
It'd either be a bunch of gimmickry or just more for the sake
Yeah.
of more.
Yeah. Don't forget that the only real legendary would be Mecha Hitler.
Actually, I'd say the bosses would probably be the totally not magical Hitlers in the thing that are supposedly just dummies on strings.
Heh.
Because introducing magical stuff into Wolfenstein would be ridiculous, right? Right? Some of you may hear that and think, "Oh, are you taking a shot at some of the more recent Wolfenstein?" No, I'm taking a shot at Spear of Destiny and Return to Castle Wolfenstein. But the the last part is resistance, which denotes the amount of punishment an enemy, based on their abilities and specialties, can ignore from your avatar's attack. It comes in three flavors: power move resistance, combat resistance, and primal resistance. Then we have a thing on power move resistance. As the name might imply, this indicates that an enemy is resistant to power moves. Enemies targeted by players' power moves roll 1d4 for each point of power move resistance. Any result of 1 will cancel the effects of the avatar's power move and cause it to deal only half damage to the enemy, rounding down. This resistance roll does not generate feedback or tributes. Easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that covers gameplay and combat. Like I said, if we did them individually, it'd be two really short episodes, and we'd end up stretching this out.
Yep. And like I said, I think my only criticism thus far is that when you take all the hits on the meat track and die that way, it gives you an immediate permanent mark. I like I said, it doesn't make sense both lore wise and mechanically. It seems like too high a cost.
Mm-hmm. I could definitely see that. But next week, I believe we are going to be tackling power moves in and of themselves. Like, let me see.
It's no, next week is our one shot, our 1 and 3.
Something that is also metal adjacent, but metal of a different genre. And those of you who've been on the channel for more than a hot minute, it'll look a bit familiar because, full disclosure, I interviewed the devs of it very early on in the Kickstarter for this project. But now that the project is almost finished, it's in like a 90% state. Last I checked, I figured this is as good a time as any to cover it. Though we're not covering the full book, obviously. That's way too much. We're going to be covering the quick start. So tune in next week as we dive into Astro Inferno, and right at the end, Bill shows up.
You missed the whole thing, Bill.
And the winner of the Doku Challenge goes to...
Well, it's okay.
We're good. We're good, Bill. You just ended up missing the bulk of the show.
You can always watch the VOD, though, man.
Mm-hmm.
As is your custom? Okay. He's aiming to win the Doku Challenge now, Monk.
At
We
least
better let
he's
Doku
honest.
know.
But of course, I'll be back here tomorrow. I'm going to be pulling double duty. Early afternoon, I'm going to be interviewing Dry Designs on his particular take on taking Digimon and putting it in tabletop. And then later on will be the return of the Cloister of the Dice, as our intrepid crew heads further north to seek out fame, glory, and cause trouble.
Trouble? No, never.
But hey, at least the airship rule hasn't been applied yet. For those who don't know the airship rule, there was a running gag for a while of anytime the party is in any sort of transportation, like an airship or a ship, that ship will crash.
Yep. In fact, we bypassed that rule because that our ship didn't crash; it just found a wreck.
Yeah, somebody else's ship crashed.
Yeah.
And you've dealt with wrecked transport, but you guys didn't cause it or happen to be in the vicinity when it happened.
Nope. Can't blame us. Not us. 1, 2, 3, not it.
And of course, there'd be some real problems if you crashed a train. But like I said, that will be covered tomorrow, and this Sunday. Those of you who like children's card games will certainly get a kick out of Geek Watch. And I'm going to be a busy boy because I'm going to be doing 3 shows, or not 3 shows, 3 shows total, but 2 interviews that I had to do because time zones. But that is a story for another night. So until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.